I have to tell you guys about a dream that I had a long time ago because I feel like it's about to happen. So basically, how it started was I was in a vehicle and I was driving around the city that I live in, and it was completely dark. The vehicle that I was in was like my real car, a small sedan, blue, right? So I'm in this vehicle driving around, and I get to my aunt's house. She lives in the nice on the nice side of town, and the moon's full. It's not really windy night, but it's just completely pitch black, dark out, right? So I walk up to my aunt's house and I knock on the door and I look around and I realize that there's literally nobody here. And as I'm walking down the sidewalk, I realize that I'm literally the only guy in the city. And I don't know how, but somehow it was communicated to me by God telepathically, not a literal voice in the dream, that some major war had popped off and that there was no men in the city, right? So as I get told this telepathically, I head back to my car. And when I'm in my car, I'm holding a baby. And while I'm holding this baby, I look over and this girl that I know that's in the army appears in the driver's seat. And she's holding a baby as well. And I don't know if that was God showing me that this has to do with war, because I don't really think that this girl was, specifically means that she was going to stay behind with me. I think it was more symbolic because she was in her uniform. And me and this girl were driving around the entire city holding these babies, realizing that we had a big burden to take care of these babies and that there was no men left in the town. And somehow I had the privilege of not being sent off to war, but that meant that I had this huge responsibility to take care of these babies. And this girl that was with me was completely silent. She wasn't speaking like she normally does. She wasn't talkative. She was stern and she was firm. And remember, she was in her uniform. So fast forward, and I forget about this dream, right? Well, today, my cousin, who is a huge Roblox nerd and really doesn't care about the kind of stuff, this kind of content, doesn't really watch like apocalypse, end of the world movies. He just cares about Roblox, right? And he designs software and all this. Anyways, he tells me that he has this dream where he sees me in the city that I'm in. Mind you, he lives in Omaha. I'm in a different city. He says that he sees me and we're standing outside of this care center, which is like a boys and girls home or a Critton center, which is basically a school for troubled kids, right? And he says that we're standing there and then these guys that are overweight come with, you know what, boomsticks, and they try to attack us. Well, he says that me and him are standing there fighting them and somehow they're chasing us, but I think he said that we get their boomsticks away from those guys and we end up winning this engagement, right? Well, he says that as we're running down the streets, he notices that he sees our family and that there's literally no men in the family left, and that there's no men left to protect the women. There's no men left to protect the kids, the girls, nothing. And that it's just me and him. And as soon as I heard that, I instantly thought of the dream that I just told you guys about. And the reason that I'm telling you this, guys, is because I don't know why, but I feel it in my spirit that they are about to pull a draft over the entire United States when this war with Iran kicks off. You have literally seen nothing, bro. And I'm telling you that I genuinely believe that a draft is coming. Whatever happens, do not believe their lies and do not sign up to fight these wars, guys.
Well, military draft rules have changed just in time for the war in Iran. What exactly has happened? Here's the story from Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a measure to automatically register men for the Selective Service, updating requirements for the first time in decades. Oh, wow. Just as we're in war now, to be fair, they did pass this in December. So this was in the December NDAA, and the rule change goes into effect this coming December 2026. So starting in December of 2026, all males aged 18 to 25 years old, or really 26, will be automatically registered for selective service. Now, proponents of this say this will just make things easier. Don't you understand? This just makes things easier because before young men had to remember to register, and if they didn't, it was a felony. And although they never got prosecuted, but this will just speed things up and make things easier. It's just easier for them. That's what this is. And others say, yeah, right. You guys are just wanting to make sure that we've got a military force of pawns that you could throw at an enemy and sacrifice their lives so that you guys could continue siphoning off resources, making a gob of money, and you just need young poor men to go on the front lines. A lot of young men before Vietnam, before they were sent off to Vietnam, when they received their induction notices, a lot of them did a lot of pretty extreme things in order to avoid being shipped off to war. My dad was telling me about some of the things that some of his friends did. Like one guy paid a friend to hit his leg with a sledgehammer. Another looked at a bright light. I think it was, like at where they're looking at really bright lights. It's not the sun, but something else, like in a factory, and tried to make himself go blind in order to avoid service. So people do some pretty extreme things in order to avoid being sent off to war. And a person should not have to choose between their life or life imprisonment because their government, the oligarchs, the corrupt, greedy, money-making warmongers in Washington want to use them for cannon fodder. It should be a personal decision. But it, unfortunately, in many countries, it is not, and young men are viewed as pawns on a chessboard to be taken out in order to protect the king.
So let's look at some quick predictions. Okay. First prediction, of course, is that the U.S. will use ground troops. Because using ground troops will create a national draft. And what does a national draft do? It creates a civil war. Right? A lot of young people are going to refuse to fight in this war. And this is going to create protests. Then America will have no choice but to deploy the National Guard. And this will create the recipe for a lot of civil conflict in America. Okay? Another thing that will happen is because you use ground troops, you will lose the war, and then CENTCOM, which is the American military in the Middle East, will then transfer over to Israel.
Okay, so he has a bit of a different theory on that one. He says, yes, there will be a draft implemented, but that draft implementation is not because we're actually going to use the soldiers in Iran. I mean, of course we will. We'll definitely do that. But it's going to kill two birds with one stone in that it's going to create civil unrest here in the United States because people will protest against a draft. And when there's that civil unrest and the National Guard is deployed onto the population, and you saw a taste of that with the ICE deployments in Minnesota, 2 Americans dead, and massive amount of civil unrest. Now, you think that level of civil unrest, you might have said, well, that was just a bunch of liberals who don't like to follow the law. I can't wait for Americans to keep on with that narrative when it's not illegals who've crossed into America who are, raping our children, which is what the narrative has been amongst those that wanted to get rid of all of the illegals in the country. Not saying they're wrong on wanting to remove people who are here illegally, but the narrative that they have is very hostile. Like, it's rather than just, well, we just want to make sure people follow the law. It's, we have to paint them into evil, like more evil than many of them really truly are. And that same narrative will be pushed on, but this time on Americans. It will be those young men who are draft dodgers. Ironically, Donald Trump is one, but they'll still say, oh, they're a bunch of draft dodgers. Look at those draft dodgers. They just need to get out there and fight for America. These are anti-Americans. They shouldn't even be citizens. They're so anti-American. But we have to throw them at a war. I mean, the narrative is going to become extremely hostile. And it's going to be hostile American against American.